Do you need startup funding for your nonprofit? Here are 3 questions you need to ask yourself right now. Let's get into it. Hey, this is Tiffany with Boss on a Budget. I help people start their nonprofits and raise money for their new nonprofits. Today we're going to talk all about startup funding and 3 important questions you need to ask yourself. If you need help, and you know you need help with raising money for your nonprofit, make sure you join my Activate Your Purpose and Profit membership society, where you get help and support in raising funds for your nonprofit. It's more like an accountability group for founders so they can stay focused on their fundraising goals. So here are 3 questions I want you to always be asking yourself in your startup process when you're raising startup funding. The first question is, how much do we need and what is it for? And the main reason why this is the first question, and the main reason why you need to ask this, is because that's what people are going to ask you. So when you start putting yourself out there and sharing information about your organization, and you get people who are interested in what you're doing, then a lot of times their question to you will be, well, how much do you need? Or what are you trying to do? How can I help? And I have found that a lot of people are not very equipped or ready to answer that question. And it's kind of funny because that's all you could ever want, right? To get to a point where somebody would even consider giving their time and or their money. And then you're anticipating that, but then when the moment finally comes, you don't know what to say. So this is one of the first things you need to be thinking about. How much do we need and what do we need it for? Because when you're doing a fundraising campaign or when you're applying for grant funding, you have to be very specific about how you want to use other people's money. And remember, this is other people's money. So they're going to want to know. They're going to have questions, and it's completely legitimate for them to have questions about, okay, where is this money going? And a big reason for that is because they want to make sure it aligns with what they want to support. They have to make a decision about whether or not they want to invest in your organization. So they need to know the information to figure out whether or not it's a good investment on their part. They need to know, well, where would this money go if I give it to you? And I want you to start thinking less about them asking because they don't trust you. It's more so, it's their money. Like they need to understand what they're giving to so they can make sure it aligns with their own goals and their own values. And this is especially for individuals when you're asking people for money. Now, it gets a little more dicey when you're talking about foundations because honestly, it's not all their money. They provide too much scrutiny sometimes when they're asking people. But at a basic level, before I go out on a tangent, a basic level, you need to know, how much you need and what is it for. In realistic terms, I'm really just saying you need a budget. In any fundraising video or training that you'll see me do, I'm going to talk about a budget. You have to put numbers to your goals. You have to be able to articulate how much it costs to achieve the goal that you have for the year. And where a lot of people get stuck with the budget is they don't know what numbers to pull from. And I always say, start with the goal. What is it you're trying to accomplish? If you know you're trying to accomplish a certain number of services or reach a certain number of people, then there are costs associated with doing that. Only you know what it will take to do that. Only you know how much effort and the materials you need and the people you need to do a class or to provide a service. So you have to figure that out. But you start with the goal of how many people or how many things you want to do and then work your way backwards. The last thing I'll say about this is that don't underestimate the power of focus. Now, your nonprofit may be doing all different kinds of things. And that's a whole nother video because honestly, if you're starting new, you shouldn't be doing 5-6 different programs. You're just going to get lost in all of that. But don't underestimate the power of focusing on one thing. So even if your organization does 3 different types of services or programs, when you're asking for money, it can be way more effective to center it around a specific ask or a specific need. Now, the money may go and help other things that are support of that specific ask, but be very specific about what the money will do. Not, well, it could help the homeless and the veterans and maybe some women here, and it can randomly do this and do this. No, your donation will ensure that this person gets to this outcome, right? We're trying to make sure 100 people get this service, and your $20 will ensure that when they show up to their class, they have the materials they need to get to this outcome. So focusing it on a program, focusing on an outcome, focusing on the change and transformation for a person not just everything or just support my overall organization and everything I'm trying to do can really be powerful. So that's why you need to understand what the money is for and the specifics of it, because then when you ask, you can get really down to the nitty gritty. This will literally help this person do this. The second question is, what are our strengths and assets and how can we leverage them? Now, you may be like, what does that even mean, Tiffany? What I want you to do is write out all of your strengths and the things that make you unique and the things that make you better than other people who are doing similar work. And so that could be in your perspective, or it could be in your knowledge. It could be that you have a vast network of people who've done the work before, or you know a lot of people so you can kind of talk to those people and get funding, or you have key relationships with people in corporations or at foundations, or you may be really good at tech or automations, or you may be really good at capturing videos or storytelling, or maybe you're really good at networking. I just gave you a bunch of different examples. So why am I saying to inventory that? Because you need to lean into your strengths. And you need to understand what your strengths are so you know where you need to invest your time in, what direction to go. And if there's a gap somewhere, then you need to know where to get help. So a lot of people may think that there's one way to make startup funding, like do it just like everybody else does it. But that's not necessarily the case. You need to do what works best for you and what your strengths are. Let me give you a really concrete example. I helped an organization raise over $100,000 to get started. And it was through a peer-to-peer fundraising strategy. And the monetary ask in that peer-to-peer fundraising strategy was $25. So we're asking people for $25 and we ended up raising like $117,000. So you may be wondering, well, how in the world did you get from $25 to that? It was because of the vast network that the founder had. He knew a lot of people in his space, and he knew that he could leverage those people. He knew that people would get excited about that mission, and he knew that they could activate their own networks because they were pretty connected too. And I'm not saying they were connected to like famous people or people who had a lot of money, right? The average gift ended up being $75, even though we asked for $25, but it still wasn't over $100, the average gift. So his strength and his assets were the people he knew, and he had a really strong message in an industry where people could connect with it quickly. So, you know, if you're trying to raise $100,000 and you're thinking, oh, I could do the same thing, well, that may not be the direction you need to take. So I know a lot of organizations that I work with have partnered with churches. So instead of identifying people to have a set of goals that they're raising, which is what we did with that organization I just talked about, your strategy may be, we're going to get churches to get involved and mobilize, and they're going to raise money for us in this way, right? So the strategy for you may look different, but you're still trying to get to a similar end goal of raising startup funding. But because you have connections in the church, and you have a lot of churches in your location, then you need to leverage what you have and leverage your assets to raise the money you need to raise. I hope that example made sense. You need to be thinking about what's the best ways and avenues for you based on where you stand and what you have and what exists. And if there are certain ways you want to lean in or you want to get stronger, then if you see gaps in that, that's how you know, okay, I need this kind of person on my team to help me get stronger in this, because I know if we get stronger in this, we'll get to our goal. But you got to do that inventory to understand that. One thing I think is really underrated that I really hope you take heed when watching this video is your knowledge. A lot of you know how to do something. A lot of you know how to work with a certain population. A lot of you can train other people in the processes that you have put in place. That's an asset. And that's an asset that you can market and that you could be paid for. You can be a trainer and train people how to do certain things based on your experience, especially if it has to do with your nonprofit. And I think a lot of people overlook that piece, that could be an earned income strategy for you as well, by you teaching people how to complete a process or how to serve people in a certain way. I just want to leave that there. If you need more help leveraging that and figuring that out, then you need to be in my membership society, because that's the kind of stuff we talk about and we go through in the society. The last question you need to be asking yourself is, how will we sustain this money? So what I see a lot of nonprofit founders do is do what they know, and there's nothing wrong with it. they'll do like a fish fry, or they'll do a popcorn fundraiser, or they'll do like a car wash or bake sale, because that's what they know. And I am not going to poo-poo that. I don't even know if poo-poo is a word, but I am not going to down or discourage anybody from doing that, because that's what gets people mobilized. And if it works, it works. But in order to really scale and grow in your nonprofit, you can't stay there. Those strategies are good for quick money, but it's really difficult to maintain relationships with people who are just buying through a popcorn fundraiser, because it's more transactional. That's the language that's used in the fundraising space: transactional versus relational. You want to do fundraising that builds relationships with people so that you can continue a relationship, so they can support you long term, because you have to keep funding your nonprofit. It's not enough to get to a point and you're like, oh, we raised this money. That money going to run out eventually. And you need to be thinking about, okay, how can we keep raising money over and over again? And a key strategy for that is to build relationships with people who can give to you over and over again, or building relationships with people who can introduce you to new opportunities to make money in different ways. So you have to invest in long-term strategies. You have to think about sustainability when you're thinking about how to raise money. It's important to do those quick fundraisers, because sometimes you need that quick money, but that can't be the only thing you're working on and the only thing you're focused on. So also think about long-term ways to make money, ways you can build relationships with people, how people can give on a recurring basis. What are ways you can actually earn money through providing a service that happens over and over again? Think in that vein when you're raising your startup funding, which in the beginning it may not seem like a lot, but because it sustains you, it really matters. So if you have 5 donors who are giving $100 a month, it may seem really small in the beginning, but in a lot of ways it can sustain you. It can pay your rent, it can pay for utilities, where you don't have to worry about always raising money every month to just pay your bills. So think about long term how you're going to sustain the funding. I hope this was helpful. If you need help with your nonprofit, you can visit me at bossonabudget.com, and don't forget to subscribe and like this video, and I will see you in the next one.